Before we walk into this story, I want to speak to the man who feels something breaking inside him, but can't quite name it. If you're watching this in silence, trying to hold everything together, while no one notices the weight you carry, this is for you. You are not weak for being tired. You are not lost for not knowing where to go next. You are standing at the doorway of something sacred, the fall that precedes your rise. Every man meets this moment, the collapse that no one prepares him for. It doesn't announce itself. It begins quietly, like a hairline crack running through the armor you've worn your whole life. At first, you try to fix it. You tell yourself it's just pressure, just stress, just life. But deep down, you know something old is dying, the image you built to survive. The strong one, the capable one, the one who never needed help. And then one day, the mask no longer fits. The job, the relationship, the goals, they all start to feel like ghosts of who you were supposed to be. You begin to sense that the power you once chased has turned against you. The world still sees a man standing tall, but inside, the crown has already fallen. This is the wound every king must face, the breaking that tears apart everything false so the true self can emerge. It feels like failure. It feels like weakness. But it's neither. It is initiation, the descent that transforms boys into men and men into souls. Stay with me until the end, because what you will hear in this story is not just about one man. It's about the hidden journey inside every man who has ever lost himself trying to be strong. The wound is not your ending, it is your beginning, because only through the fall can the true king rise. It always begins with light, the kind that makes people stop and stare, the kind that convinces everyone, including him, that he was born for something great. He moves through the world like it owes him a crown. Every word he speaks lands with certainty. Every step feels like destiny. They call him gifted, wise beyond his years, the one who will go far. And he believes them. How could he not? When the world keeps feeding you praise, it's easy to mistake attention for truth. But behind the glow, something else is growing. Something quiet. Something unseen. It starts as a small whisper in the back of his mind. The feeling that maybe all this light isn't really his. That maybe it's just a reflection of what others want to see. He doesn't dare listen. He learns early that doubt is weakness. That showing uncertainty makes people uncomfortable. So he hides it. He smiles wider. He performs better. He becomes exactly what the world applauds him for being. And yet, late at night, when the noise fades, he feels it, that strange emptiness that creeps in when the cheering stops. He wonders who he is when no one's watching. But before the thought can settle, he buries it under plans, goals, and promises. There's no time for weakness. He tells himself he just needs to keep moving, keep achieving, keep shining. That's what everyone expects from the golden boy. His charm becomes his armor. His confidence becomes a mask. He learns how to say the right things, how to smile through the exhaustion, how to keep the illusion alive. The world loves his brightness, not realizing it's burning him from the inside. Because light, when not grounded, starts to blind. He begins to live for the reflection, for how others see him, not how he truly feels. Every compliment feeds the illusion. Every success builds a cage. And slowly, the boy who once felt infinite becomes trapped by his own perfection. He doesn't notice it happening. No one ever does. The descent never begins with a fall. It begins with applause. Sometimes he catches glimpses of himself in the mirror and doesn't recognize the eyes staring back. There's confidence there, yes, but also something hollow, a kind of sadness that doesn't have words. He brushes it off. There's always another goal, another person to impress, another way to prove he's still worthy of the light. He thinks this is what strength looks like, holding everything together, pretending nothing touches him. But strength built on pretending isn't strength at all. It's survival. And every act of survival leaves a scar, even if you can't see it yet. The world still calls him the golden boy, still feeds the story he's too scared to question. But deep down, the light flickers. The shadow grows stronger. And somewhere inside, The real man, the one who will one day have to fall, is waiting, quietly, for his turn to rise. They told him he had made it. The job, the recognition, the admiration, everything he was taught to chase was now his. On the surface, it looks like triumph. He smiles in the pictures, says all the right words, stands in rooms that once felt unreachable. But when the noise fades and the lights dim, something inside him feels strangely quiet, not peaceful, but empty. It's the silence that comes when you realize you've climbed the mountain, only to find it was the wrong one. He should feel proud. Everyone says so. But pride doesn't come. Only pressure. The kind that makes breathing feel like a performance. Every victory feels like a costume he's expected to wear. One that never truly fits. He nods through the praise, smiles through the speeches, but behind the eyes, there's a boy still wondering what any of it really means. He wears the crown well, straight posture, steady voice, but deep down, it's weightless. It doesn't anchor him. It floats above him, fragile, like it could fall at any moment. People look at him and see success. What they don't see is the fear that it could all disappear. Because deep down, he knows it's built on something shaky, the approval of others. The image he crafted so carefully, he's not sure who he'd be if that image broke. He's afraid to find out. So he keeps playing the part, the confident one, the achiever, the one who never doubts. It's easier that way. The world rewards masks more than it rewards honesty. But no matter how perfect the act, the soul always knows when something isn't real. He starts to feel it in small ways, the way joy doesn't last, the way laughter feels forced, the way success feels like sugar that melts too quickly. There's a hollowness hiding behind every applause. Each new milestone feels smaller than the last. It's like chasing a finish line that keeps moving farther away. Late at night, he lies awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering why the crown doesn't feel like victory. Maybe because it was never earned through struggle. Maybe because it was given, not discovered. He begins to realize that true strength doesn't come from what you build for others to see. It comes from what survives when everything else falls apart. But he's not ready to face that truth yet. Not now. So he keeps the crown polished, keeps the illusion alive. He learns how to hide exhaustion behind ambition, how to turn doubt into motivation, how to keep smiling even when he feels like breaking. It works for a while, long enough for the world to keep believing the story, and for him to keep pretending he believes it too. But somewhere inside, the shadow stirs again, the one that whispers, "There's more to you than this." He ignores it. He has everything he thought he wanted, but the deeper truth waits patiently beneath the surface, knowing that one day the crown will slip, and when it does, he'll finally see that what he built wasn't strength, it was shelter. And no shelter can last forever. He grew up thinking strength looked a certain way. Broad shoulders, a steady voice, the ability to fix what was broken without flinching. That's what he saw in his father. A man who didn't cry. A man who always had an answer. A man who carried the weight of the world and never complained. He didn't realize it then, but every time he watched his father hold everything together, he was learning how to hide. Not his father's fault, just the quiet inheritance that passes between men who don't know how to speak their pain. As a boy, he wanted to be like him, to stand the same way, to speak with the same calm, to wear silence like armor. He mistook control for confidence, distance for wisdom, toughness for truth. Every time he fell, he tried to get up faster. Every time he cried, he wiped it away before anyone could see. He thought that was what men did: endure without expression, love without words, bleed without showing the wound. But now, as he grows older, he begins to notice something strange. The man in the mirror doesn't look like him anymore. He looks like his father. The gestures, the tone, even the way his eyes harden when something hurts. It's like he's become a reflection he never chose to copy. He's doing what he was shown, not what he feels. Living from a script that was written before he even knew he had one. There's a quiet ache that comes with this realization. The kind that doesn't shout, just lingers. He wonders how much of his life has been built on imitation. Every time he forced a smile, instead of speaking his truth. Every time he stayed strong when he should have been soft. Every time he buried pain, instead of naming it. He thought he was becoming a man, but maybe he was just becoming a ghost of someone else's strength. Sometimes he remembers moments from childhood, his father sitting in the same chair, staring out the window, lost in thought. Back then, he thought it was peace. Now, he's not so sure. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe it was all the unsaid things that men never learn how to say. He starts to wonder how many generations carried that same silence, passing it down like an heirloom. It's hard to unlearn the image of a man who taught you everything about survival, but nothing about surrender. But something inside him knows that to find his own strength, he has to step out of the shadow. He has to break the mirror, not out of anger, but out of love. He still respects the man who raised him. He always will. But now, he begins to see that real strength isn't about holding everything together. It's about knowing when to let it fall apart. The crown he wears, the mask he built, even the calm he learned, all of it was borrowed. And somewhere deep within, the boy who once worshipped his father begins to whisper to the man he's become, "It's time to find your own way." He keeps moving because stopping feels dangerous. The silence has always scared him. In silence, the cracks show. In silence, the questions start whispering. So he builds a life loud enough to drown them out. He fills his days with noise, meetings, messages, goals, people, plans. There's always something to do, someone to impress, something to fix. It looks like progress from the outside, but inside, it's chaos disguised as purpose. He calls it ambition. Others call it success. But the truth is, it's distraction, a carefully built fortress of motion. He tells himself he's chasing dreams, but he's really running from the stillness that would force him to face himself. There's always another task, another call, another reason to avoid the quiet. Because in the quiet, he feels it, that hollow ache that's been following him since the crown first slipped. He learns to keep busy enough that he never has to feel empty. Every win gives him a small hit of meaning, but it fades fast. Like a candle in the wind, it burns bright for a moment, then disappears, leaving the room darker than before. He keeps lighting more candles, more praise, more money, more validation, but none of it fills the emptiness. The more he gains, the more he loses sight of why he started. People admire his drive. They say he's disciplined, focused, unstoppable, and he lets them believe it because their admiration keeps the illusion alive. He becomes addicted to movement, the next goal, the next project, the next escape. It doesn't matter where he's going, as long as he doesn't have to stop and ask why. Late at night, when the world goes quiet and the phone stops buzzing, he feels it again, the weight he's been outrunning. It sits in his chest, heavy and patient. He tries to distract himself again, music, messages, anything to avoid the mirror. But the silence always finds a way in. It waits for him. It knows that the kingdom he's built is fragile, that one small pause could make the whole thing crumble. He's surrounded by everything he once wanted, yet none of it feels like home. The throne he sits on is cold, the applause distant. He starts to wonder if he's achieved success or just mastered avoidance. Every time someone calls him lucky or driven, he feels a small sting of guilt, because deep down, he knows this isn't strength. It's survival. He thinks back to when he was younger, before the noise, before the masks, back when happiness was simple, quiet, effortless. Somewhere along the way, he traded that peace for performance. And now, the boy who once dreamed of being king sits surrounded by everything he thought he wanted, yet feels further from himself than ever. The kingdom is vast, but it's empty. The throne is tall, but it's lonely. And for the first time, He begins to realize that no amount of distraction can protect him from the truth waiting in the silence, the truth that he is lost. It doesn't happen all at once. At first, it's small things, things he can explain away. The excitement fades faster. The victories feel thinner. The people who used to make him feel seen now only make him feel tired. He tells himself it's just a phase, that he just needs a break, that he's been working too hard. But deep down, something is shifting, something that won't be silenced anymore. He wakes up one morning and the world feels heavier. The same routine that once made him feel powerful now feels pointless. The same goals that used to drive him forward now leave him numb. He looks around at the life he built, the career, the friends, the noise, and for the first time, it all looks fragile. Like a set built for a play he no longer believes in. People still see the same man, the confident one, the achiever, the leader. They don't notice the crack in the crown, but he does. It's small at first, invisible to the world, but loud in his mind. He feels it every time he forces a smile, every time he says he's fine when he isn't, every time he tries to hold together a version of himself that's starting to fall apart. He used to find meaning in control, but now control feels like a cage. Every achievement he adds to his throne makes it lean a little more. He starts forgetting things, missing calls, losing focus. The more he tries to hold it all together, the more it slips through his fingers. It's as if life itself is trying to show him something he refuses to see. The people around him start to change too. Or maybe it's him who's changing. Conversations feel shallow. The laughter feels forced. The same faces that once gave him comfort now remind him of how disconnected he feels. It's like everyone's still playing a game he's quietly stopped believing in. At night he lies awake and feels the weight of everything he's built pressing on his chest. The silence that once scared him now feels like the only thing that's real. But he still resists it. He still tells himself he can fix it if he just tries harder, if he just keeps pushing, if he just finds one more goal to chase. Yet the harder he tries, the more it all falls apart. Then one day something inside him breaks, not with noise, but with clarity. A realization so quiet it's almost cruel. He doesn't know who he is without the crown, without the titles, without the praise. He's spent so long trying to be the man everyone needed that he's forgotten what it means to just be himself. He looks in the mirror and sees the crack clearly, now running right through the reflection. The image he built is splitting, piece by piece, and somewhere beneath the breaking, something real begins to stir. The crown may be falling, but for the first time, he's starting to see the man beneath it. It's easy to blame the world when things fall apart, to say it was timing, luck, betrayal, anything but himself. But there comes a moment when the excuses run out, when the noise quiets and the truth steps forward. That moment has arrived. He can't outrun it anymore. The enemy he's been fighting wasn't out there. It was inside him all along. It starts with a loss he didn't see coming. Something that shakes him to the core. Maybe a job that slips away. A person who walks out. A truth that exposes everything he tried to hide. Whatever it is, it hits hard. Pride takes the first blow. Control takes the second. And in the silence that follows, he feels something he hasn't felt in a long time: humility. The kind that burns before it heals. He thought he could hold everything together through strength, through willpower, through pretending. But life has a way of showing you what pretending costs. The mask cracks, and beneath it, he finds a man he doesn't fully recognize. A man who's been running from pain by calling it discipline. A man who's been avoiding honesty by calling it strength. He sits with the realization, and it hurts. It's not the kind of pain you can explain to anyone. It's deeper than that. It's the pain of seeing how much of your life was built on illusion. Every lie you told yourself to stay comfortable now feels heavy. He thought his power came from control, but now he sees it came from fear. Fear of losing the image, the approval, the certainty that made him feel safe. He remembers the moments he ignored the quiet voice inside. The one that warned him, whispered that something was off. He silenced it every time. Now it returns louder than ever, demanding to be heard. It tells him the truth he's avoided. That his downfall didn't begin with anyone else's betrayal. It began the moment he started betraying himself. It's a hard truth to face, that the wound didn't come from others, but from within. He sees how often he lied to keep the peace, how often he said yes when he wanted to say no, how often he chose image over integrity. Each small betrayal built up, brick by brick, until it formed the wall that now traps him. And now that wall is crumbling. The illusions that once protected him are collapsing, and he's forced to see what's real. The man he's been pretending to be stands face to face with the man he really is. For a moment, it feels unbearable. But deep down, he knows this is necessary. You can't rebuild truth on top of lies. The wound stings, but it's honest. It strips away everything false. Pride falls first, then certainty, then control. All that's left is the raw self, scared, uncertain, real. And though it feels like breaking, it's actually the beginning of becoming whole. The crown may be gone, the illusion shattered, but in its place, something stronger is being born. A man no longer afraid to face his own reflection. The fall doesn't come with warning. It comes quietly, almost gently, until everything crashes at once. One moment he's holding his life together, and the next it's slipping through his fingers like sand. The things that once gave him identity, the job, the title, the relationship, the sense of purpose, all begin to fade, one by one. It's not just loss, it's erasure. The world that once revolved around him stops spinning, and he's left standing in the ruins, wondering how it all happened so fast. At first, he tries to fight it. He works harder, smiles more, tells himself this is just a setback. But deep down, he feels the truth. The foundation is gone. The version of himself he's been protecting is collapsing, and there's nothing left to stand on. He's always been good at fixing things, but this isn't something he can fix. You can't rebuild what was never real to begin with. The phone stops ringing. The messages slow down. People move on quicker than he thought they would. He learns how fragile admiration can be, how fast respect disappears when you no longer serve the image people fell in love with. The silence grows heavy. The same silence he used to run from is now his only companion. He walks through familiar places, and they feel different. The colors are duller. The air feels colder. Even his own reflection looks like a stranger. The confident eyes are gone, replaced with something softer, something lost. He wonders where that man went, the one who always had a plan, always knew what to do next. But the truth hits him hard. That man was never real. He was a role he played, and the show is finally over. There's grief in losing what once made you feel powerful, but there's also clarity in it. The noise that once filled his life is gone, and beneath it, he begins to hear something else, something small, something honest. It's his own voice, faint but steady, asking, "Who are you without all of this?" It's a question he can't yet answer, but for the first time, he's listening. He stops pretending everything's fine. The mask is too heavy now. The world sees the fall as failure, but deep inside, it feels like truth finally catching up. The illusions have burned away, and all that remains is what's real. It's terrifying and freeing all at once. There are nights when he lies awake and feels like he's disappearing, like the man he used to be is fading into memory. But in the space where everything has fallen apart, something new begins to breathe. A quiet awareness, a raw humility, the faint spark of a different kind of strength. He has lost everything that once defined him. But maybe that's the point, because sometimes the throne has to crumble before the man beneath it can finally stand on his own. The world he knew is gone. The roads that once led him somewhere now twist into fog. There are no signs, no maps, no clear way forward, only silence and the sound of his own footsteps. This is the dark forest, the place every man eventually enters when the life he built no longer fits. He doesn't realize it yet, but this isn't punishment. It's initiation. The fall was only the door. This is where the real journey begins. At first, he resists. He tries to find the old paths again, the ones that once made sense. He looks for meaning in familiar things, work, people, distractions, but they no longer answer him. It's like shouting into a canyon and hearing only the echo of his own voice. The world feels hollow now, stripped of color. The man who once commanded every room can barely command his own thoughts. He feels lost in every way a person can be lost. There's no plan to follow, no role to hide behind, no mask to wear. The silence of the forest surrounds him, pressing in from every side. It's uncomfortable, even terrifying. He starts to understand why most people never make it this far. Because being alone with yourself is the hardest thing there is. Every step forward feels uncertain, like walking through shadows that move when you're not looking. Some days, he tries to escape. He tells himself he can rebuild, find new goals, start again. But the forest doesn't let him leave so easily. Every time he tries to run, it pulls him back not with force, but with truth. It reminds him that you can't rebuild what hasn't healed. You can't find direction until you've faced what's been hiding in the dark. At night, he sits beneath the trees and feels the weight of his own silence. Memories rise like ghosts, the things he's done, the people he's hurt, the parts of himself he's ignored. There's nowhere left to hide from them now. The forest doesn't judge, it just reflects. Every shadow he sees around him is a piece of himself he's never faced. Slowly, something begins to change. The fear doesn't disappear, but it softens. The silence that once felt heavy starts to feel sacred. The forest, once threatening, begins to whisper instead of roar. It tells him to stop running, to listen, to learn. He begins to realize that he's not lost, he's being stripped clean. Every step through the darkness is a lesson in humility, patience, and truth. One night, as the wind moves through the trees, he feels something shift inside him. A small, steady calm. It's not peace yet, but it's close. He understands now that the forest isn't here to destroy him. It's here to teach him what no one else could. The man who entered it was proud, certain, untested. The one who will emerge will be different, quieter, wiser, and ready to rise again. But for now, he walks on, guided by nothing but the faint light still flickering within. The forest has taken almost everything from him. The noise, the pride, the illusions. All that remains now is silence. And in that silence, something unexpected happens. He begins to see a figure moving through the shadows, small, hesitant, familiar. At first, he thinks it's just another ghost of memory. But when he looks closer, he realizes who it is. It's the boy he used to be. The one who laughed easily, who believed without fear, who wanted nothing more than to be seen and loved. The one he left behind. The boy looks at him without judgment, but the silence between them is heavy. It's been years since they've met, years since he even thought about the child who once dreamed with such open hands. The man stares, unsure what to say. What do you tell the version of yourself you abandoned just to survive? The boy doesn't speak. He just looks at him with eyes full of questions. Eyes that still remember the day he learned to hide. The day he realized the world only loved certain parts of him. The parts that smiled, that performed, that pleased. Every time he cried, someone told him to be strong. Every time he showed pain, someone told him to grow up. So he learned to bury his feelings, to wear confidence like armor, to turn every wound into a smile. Now that same smile sits frozen on the man's face, but it doesn't work anymore. The boy can see through it. He always could. And for the first time in his life, the man can't look away. He sees how deeply that child still lives inside him, scared, lonely, exhausted from carrying the weight of being enough. He kneels down and meets the boy's eyes. There's no speech, no apology big enough to cover the years of silence, only truth. He realizes that all his striving, all his chasing, all his endless proving, it was never about power. It was about trying to make the boy feel safe again. Every achievement was a way to tell the child within him, "See, we made it. You're not small anymore. You're not weak." But the boy doesn't care about any of that. He never wanted crowns or praise. He just wanted to be held. Tears come, quiet and unexpected. The man doesn't fight them this time. He lets the walls fall, lets the ache rise. It feels strange, like remembering how to breathe after years of holding his breath. For the first time in a long time, he feels human again. The boy steps closer, places a small hand over his heart, and in that touch, something shifts. The distance between who he was and who he's become begins to close. The man finally whispers the words the boy needed all along. "I see you. I'm sorry I left." The forest is silent again, but it feels different now, not empty, but alive. He walks on with the boy beside him, no longer hidden, no longer forgotten. And though the path ahead is still dark, he knows now he'll never walk it alone. He finds her one evening when the forest is washed in silver light. She stands near the edge of a stream, calm and still, as if she's been waiting for him all along. She doesn't speak right away. She doesn't have to. There's something about her presence that feels both familiar and unsettling, like meeting a truth you've spent your whole life avoiding. She is not there to comfort him, and not to test him either. She is there to reflect. He tries to ask who she is, but the words fall apart before they reach his lips. She only smiles faintly, and the silence between them feels alive. When she finally speaks, her voice is soft, but it carries weight, the kind that reaches deeper than sound. "You've been walking in circles," she says, "trying to fix what isn't broken, trying to escape what isn't meant to be escaped." Her words sting. He wants to argue, to explain that he's just trying to find his way out, but something in her eyes stops him. There's no judgment there, only understanding, the kind that makes you realize she's seen every part of you already. She gestures toward the stream and tells him to look. When he does, he doesn't see his reflection, he sees his pain. All the moments he's tried to bury, all the feelings he's refused to feel. They ripple across the surface like ghosts made of water. He looks away, but she doesn't let him. "You can't heal what you keep running from," she says. "The wound isn't the enemy. It's the doorway." The words hit something deep inside him. For so long, he thought healing meant moving past the pain, replacing it with strength, logic, achievement. But she shows him something else. That real healing comes from entering the very thing you fear most. To feel, not to escape. To grieve, not to deny. To sit in the ache until it stops being a stranger. She tells him the wound isn't just the place he was hurt. It's also the place he'll find his heart again. Every emotion he's buried, sadness, shame, longing, they're not weaknesses. They're the keys back to his humanity. The more he's avoided them, the further he's drifted from himself. For the first time, he lets himself cry, not the quiet, controlled kind, but the real kind. The kind that shakes you open. The kind that doesn't care who's watching. The woman doesn't try to stop him. She simply stands there, her presence steady and patient, like the earth itself holding space for his storm. When it's over, the forest feels different. The air is lighter, the shadows softer. He looks back at the woman, but she's already fading into the trees, her voice echoing like wind through the branches. "Don't fear the wound. It's where your soul remembers who you are." He stands there long after she's gone, feeling the truth of her words settle deep within him. For the first time, he doesn't run from the pain. He steps toward it, and the forest, once dark and endless, begins to glow from within. The night feels endless. There are no stars, no path, no sound, only darkness stretching in every direction. He doesn't know how long he's been walking. Hours, days, maybe longer. The forest has swallowed him whole, and now even his thoughts feel heavy. For the first time, he begins to understand what it means to be truly alone, not just without people, but without identity. Without the story he's always told himself about who he is. The titles, the strength, the pride, all gone. What's left is just nothing. He tries to hold on to something familiar, a memory, a name, a goal, but it all slips through his hands. The man who once carried himself like a king now feels like dust in the wind. There's no power here, no control, only silence. And in that silence, he feels the weight of every illusion breaking. He thought the fall was the hardest part, but this is worse. This is the death after the fall. The death of the version of himself that always needed to be someone. He spent his whole life building an image that made him feel safe, important, untouchable. Now that image is burning away, and it feels like his entire being is going with it. He sits on the cold ground, staring into the dark. His mind begs for something to cling to, but there's nothing left to reach for. A part of him wants to scream, to fight, to rebuild. But another part knows this isn't something to escape. This is something to endure, something to surrender to. He feels the fear rise, the deep, ancient kind. The fear of being nothing, of disappearing, of realizing that without the armor of ego, there might be no him left at all. The panic builds until it breaks. And when it does, the silence that follows is almost unbearable. But inside that silence, something strange begins to happen. Beneath the fear, beneath the loss, there's a flicker of calm. Not peace, not yet just stillness. He realizes that the voice that always pushed him, always demanded more, is gone. The constant need to prove, to achieve, to be someone, it's quiet now. For the first time, there is no war inside him, just space, empty, infinite space. The man who once ruled his world is gone, and in his place sits someone unrecognizable, someone softer, humbler, human. The death of the ego feels like destruction, but deep down, he knows it's not the end. It's the clearing, the burning away of everything false, so that something real can finally take root. The night doesn't give him answers. It doesn't promise redemption or reward. It just holds him still, silent, stripped, bare. And in that darkness, he begins to sense something quiet and sacred rising within him. A truth he can't yet name. The king has died, yes. But what's waiting to be born is something far greater, the man beneath the crown. At first, he thinks the pain is punishment, the price for everything he's done wrong, every choice that led him here. But as the days pass, something inside him begins to shift. The pain stops feeling like an enemy and starts to feel like a messenger. It isn't here to break him. It's here to speak. It starts quietly, like a voice carried on wind. He feels it before he hears it, a kind of knowing that rises from somewhere deeper than thought. The wound that once felt unbearable now hums with strange life, like a flame burning in the center of his chest. He realizes that it's been there all along, waiting for him to stop running long enough to listen. Every ache, every loss, every collapse was the wound trying to tell him something. Wake up. He closes his eyes and lets the memories surface, all the times he ignored the warning signs, all the ways he abandoned himself in the name of strength. He sees how many times he confused silence for peace, pride for courage, control for love. The wound doesn't mock him for it. It just shows him, patiently, what he couldn't face before. The pain speaks not in words, but in feeling. It tells him that what he's lost was never meant to stay. It tells him that the breaking wasn't failure. It was the only way through. For so long, he believed that life was about building higher, becoming more, holding tighter. But now he sees that growth sometimes comes only through destruction. That losing everything was the only way to remember what really matters. The suffering hasn't made him bitter. It's made him tender, softer in places that were once hardened. When he looks at the world now, He sees others carrying invisible wounds of their own, hiding behind the same masks he once wore. For the first time, he doesn't look at them with judgment, he looks at them with recognition. Pain has made him human again. He begins to understand that suffering is not cruelty, it's invitation. It pulls you into the fire so that everything false can burn away. It strips you down to the soul so you can finally meet yourself without disguise. Every tear becomes a prayer. Every scar becomes a teacher. The wound doesn't take your power. It gives it back to you in a truer form, one that isn't built on fear. He sits in the quiet and feels gratitude rise where resentment once lived. It surprises him. Gratitude for the fall. Gratitude for the breaking. Gratitude for the pain that showed him what pretending could never teach. He doesn't call it healing yet. Healing feels too clean, too final. What he feels is awakening, a slow, steady opening. The wound is still there, but it no longer bleeds. It glows. And in its glow, he finally understands pain was never the end of his story. It was the beginning of his becoming. There's a stillness that comes after the breaking, not peace, not yet, but something gentler. The storm has passed, and all that's left are the ashes of who he used to be. For a while, he just sits there, surrounded by everything that's fallen apart. And in that silence, something small and sacred begins to take shape inside him. Humility. It doesn't arrive with fanfare or wisdom. It comes quietly, through the cracks left by pain. He used to think humility was weakness. He thought it meant lowering yourself, shrinking so others could rise. But now he sees it differently. Humility isn't about being less. It's about being real. It's about admitting that you don't have all the answers, that life is bigger than your plans, that strength isn't something you force, it's something you grow into once you stop pretending. For so long, he lived like he was in control. Every moment was a battle to prove himself, to be right, to be strong, to be enough. But after losing everything, after facing the darkness inside himself, he sees how exhausting that was. Proving is a prison. It keeps you trapped in the image you're terrified of losing. Listening, though, that's freedom. He starts to listen in ways he never did before, to the quiet voice within him, to the rhythm of his breath, to the way life moves even when he's still. He listens to others, too, really listens. Not to respond, not to fix, but to understand. Every person he meets feels like a mirror, reflecting something back to him that he once overlooked. He realizes that everyone carries a story. Everyone fights a battle, and no one truly knows what they're doing. That truth humbles him in a way no failure ever could. The fire that once drove him to achieve now burns differently. It's no longer about climbing or proving. It's about presence, about learning from what he once ran from. Humility becomes the new flame, softer, steadier, but just as strong. It burns away the pride that kept him blind. It clears space for gratitude, compassion, and wisdom. He begins to see beauty in the ordinary, in conversations, in mistakes, in moments of stillness that once felt unbearable. Every breath feels like a small miracle now. He doesn't need to be admired anymore. He doesn't need to be understood. The need to impress fades into something simpler, the desire to be true. Sometimes he still feels the ache of what he's lost, but instead of running from it, he bows to it. The pain taught him more than success ever could. It showed him who he isn't and who he can become. And as he stands in the quiet glow of that understanding, he realizes something he never knew before. Humility isn't the end of power. It's where real power begins, not the kind that conquers, but the kind that listens, learns, and loves anyway. The ground is still warm from everything that burned. The kingdom he once built is gone. The walls, the pride, the noise all turned to ash. For a while, he just stands there, surrounded by the remains of his old life. There's no anger left, no desperate need to rebuild, only quiet, only truth. And in that stillness, something begins to shimmer beneath the ashes. At first, he doesn't notice it. He's too tired to look for meaning anymore. But as the wind shifts, he catches a glint of light buried in the dust. He kneels down and brushes the ash away, revealing a blade tarnished, scarred, but still whole, his old sword. The symbol of his strength, the same one he once used to fight everything that threatened his control. But now, it feels different in his hands. Lighter, honest. He used to swing it out of pride to prove himself, to protect his image, to silence the fear inside. Every battle he fought came from ego. Every victory left him emptier. But now, as he holds the sword again, he feels something new. It's not about power anymore. It's about presence. The strength that comes from standing in truth, not from conquering others. The sword no longer gleams like before. Its shine is muted, its edges worn. Yet somehow, it feels more real this way, forged not in glory, but in humility. It's a reminder of what he's been through, of the fire that shaped him. Each scar on the metal matches one inside him, and together, they tell a story not of perfection, but of transformation. He tests the weight of it in his hand and feels no need to prove anything. He doesn't want to fight the world anymore. The real battle was never out there, it was always within. Against pride, against fear, against the need to be more than he already is. And for the first time, he feels victorious. Not because he's won, but because he no longer needs to. He walks through the ruins with the sword resting at his side, not as a weapon, but as a symbol. It reminds him that strength isn't loud. It doesn't demand attention. True strength is silent and steady. It's the courage to stay open, to stay honest, even when it hurts. It's the power to face the world without armor, knowing that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's truth uncovered. When the sun begins to rise, the light hits the sword and reflects softly across the ashes. He watches it glow and realizes this is what the fire was for. Not to destroy him, but to refine him. To burn away everything false until only the essential remained. He no longer needs to chase greatness. He no longer needs to be a king. He just needs to be present, fully here, fully alive. The sword in his hand is no longer a tool for war. It's a reminder of what real strength looks like. Quiet, grounded, and free. The ruins are silent, except for the wind. Broken stones lie scattered like pieces of an old story, one he's finally stopped trying to rewrite. He walks slowly through what's left, feeling both heavy and light at the same time. There's no crown here, no throne, no audience to applaud him, just the echo of his own footsteps. And somewhere in that echo, another sound begins to rise, a voice, low and calm, coming from the quiet itself. He turns, but no one is there. It doesn't matter. The voice isn't outside of him. It's coming from within, old, familiar, patient, the kind of voice that doesn't command, just reminds. You've been looking for guidance in the wrong places, it says. You keep searching for someone to show you the way, but the path has been waiting inside you all along. He closes his eyes and listens. The voice feels like both a whisper and a weight, like the earth itself speaking through him. It sounds like an elder, not a man of flesh and bone, but a presence that has been walking beside him since the beginning. He doesn't ask who it is. Somehow, he already knows. It's the wiser part of himself, the one that's been quiet, while the noise of pride and fear filled the air. The part he silenced when he thought he had to be strong. The voice doesn't offer instructions or answers. It doesn't promise success or safety. It only gives him truth, raw, simple, undeniable. You have spent your life trying to become, it says. Now you must remember, the king you are looking for was never out there. He's been sleeping inside you, waiting for you to wake. He opens his eyes, and for a moment, everything looks clearer. The ruins don't feel like a symbol of failure anymore. They feel sacred, the remains of what needed to fall, so truth could rise. The elder voice continues, softer now. True kingship isn't about ruling others. It's about ruling yourself. It's not about control, but balance. Not about power, but presence. He feels those words settle deep within him, like roots finding soil. For the first time, he understands that wisdom isn't something you learn, it's something you uncover. Every mistake, every loss, every crack in his armor has been leading him back here, back to himself. The wind moves through the ruins, and for a brief moment, it sounds like the voice is carried with it ancient, ageless, timeless. Remember who you are, it says one last time, and then the silence returns. He stands there quietly, the sword still at his side, the weight of the past behind him. He doesn't feel small anymore. He doesn't feel lost. The mentor hasn't saved him. He's reminded him that he was never broken to begin with. As he walks away from the ruins, the air feels different. The path ahead isn't clear, but for the first time, he isn't afraid of not knowing. The voice still lingers inside him, steady, strong, and calm, reminding him that true power isn't found in being followed. It's found in remembering who you are. The world hasn't changed, but somehow it looks different now. The same trees, the same sky, the same wind moving through the leaves, yet everything feels alive in a way it never did before. It's as if the darkness he walked through has peeled something off his eyes. He doesn't just see the surface anymore. He sees beneath it into the quiet pulse of life that's always been there waiting for him to notice. For so long he thought vision meant clarity, the ability to plan, to predict, to know what comes next. But this kind of sight is different. It's not about control. It's about understanding. About trusting that even the broken parts of his story have meaning. He begins to see that nothing was wasted, not the fall, not the pain, not the silence. Each piece, no matter how small or sharp, belongs to something greater. The fragments start to fit together, not perfectly, but truthfully. He walks through the world with softer steps now. The things he used to rush past the sound of rain, the warmth of sunlight, the small kindness of a stranger, they touch him differently. Life feels sacred again, not because it's easy, but because it's real. Every moment, even the painful ones, carries something to learn. Pain no longer feels like punishment. It feels like guidance. It doesn't demand to be avoided anymore. It asks to be understood. He remembers the times he cursed the struggle, the nights he thought he'd never make it through. But now, when he looks back, he sees the pattern, how every heartbreak stripped away another layer of illusion, how every failure shaped his strength. What once felt like ruin was actually a kind of rebuilding. Life wasn't breaking him, it was preparing him. When he meets people now, he listens differently. He doesn't look at who they pretend to be. He looks at the light behind their eyes, the wounds they hide, the quiet resilience that keeps them moving. He understands that everyone is carrying something unseen, that compassion is not pity, it's recognition. Sometimes he still feels fear, still feels doubt, but he no longer fights them. He lets them pass through like clouds across the sky. They're part of the weather of being human. Even the storms have their place. He sees now that the path was never supposed to be straight. It twists, it falls apart, it begins again, and that's the beauty of it. As he stands at the edge of the forest, morning light spilling across the ground, he realizes he's no longer searching for meaning. He's living it. The world hasn't changed, but he has. His eyes have learned to see what was always true, that life is not something to conquer, but something to bow to. That pain was never meant to destroy him. It was meant to open him. And through that opening, everything becomes whole again. The world he left behind still exists, the noise, the ambition, the endless race to prove. But now, when he steps back into it, he feels different. The same halls, the same faces, the same routines, yet everything moves slower, like a film he's already seen before. He no longer feels the pull to play the part he once did. The mask has lost its grip. What used to define him, success, validation, control, feels small now compared to what he's found within. At first, it's hard to return. The world expects the old version of him, the confident achiever, the man who always had an answer. People still speak to him like he's that person, and for a moment, he almost slips back into the role. But then he feels it, that subtle tension, the split between who he was and who he's become. He realizes he can't live only in the outer world anymore, but he also can't stay hidden in the inner one. The truth is not in either extreme. It's in learning how to walk between them. He begins to move through his days differently. He still works, still speaks, still shows up, but now he does it from a quieter place. The old hunger is gone. He doesn't need to be seen anymore. He just needs to be real. When people praise him, he smiles, but it doesn't fill him. When they misunderstand him, it doesn't shake him. His worth no longer depends on their reflection. It lives deeper, anchored in something steady. He learns to carry both worlds inside him, the outer and the inner, the seen and the unseen. One teaches him how to act, the other teaches him how to be. There's balance now, a kind of invisible bridge that connects the two. On one side is motion, on the other stillness, and in the middle, he walks grounded, awake, unshaken. Sometimes he's tested. The world tries to pull him back into its rhythm, to make him chase, compare, compete, but he can feel the falseness of it now, and it doesn't stick the way it used to. The noise passes through him like wind through leaves. The truth he found in the forest, the silence, the humility, the honesty stays with him no matter where he goes. He no longer divides his life into sacred and ordinary. Everything is sacred now, the work, the rest, the laughter, the silence. The same things that once distracted him now remind him to stay awake. He's not trying to escape the world anymore. He's learning how to move through it without losing himself. As he walks, he feels the two worlds blend, the outer strength of a man who acts and the inner peace of a man who knows. They no longer fight for control. They exist together, like sunlight reflected on water. He's no longer pretending. He's no longer split. The king who once ruled by force now leads by presence, whole, grounded, and finally at peace. He meets her again, though not the same way as before. This time there are no masks, no chase, no illusion. The air between them feels calm, almost sacred, not filled with tension or need, but with quiet understanding. She is not a mirror for his missing pieces anymore. She is her own world, and for the first time, he doesn't try to own it. He simply stands beside it, in awe of its depth. She doesn't arrive to rescue him, and he doesn't arrive to save her. They meet in the middle, two whole souls, not halves searching for completion. There's a different kind of beauty in it now, something softer but stronger. He remembers the woman in the woods, the one who taught him that the wound wasn't meant to be escaped, but entered. This woman carries that same energy, but now he sees her not as a guide, but as an equal flame. She looks at him and sees not a king or a savior, but a man, honest, imperfect, alive. And in her gaze, he sees the reflection of who he's become. Not the performer, not the achiever, not the boy chasing approval, just himself, grounded in truth. Their connection doesn't come from need, but from recognition. From two souls who have learned to stand on their own and still choose to walk together. He used to think love was about holding on, about keeping someone close so they wouldn't leave. But now he understands that real love has nothing to do with control. Love is not a cage, it's space. It's trust. It's the courage to let someone be exactly who they are, even if that means they might someday walk away. In her presence, he learns that strength isn't about being unshakable, it's about being open. It's the ability to feel deeply and not run from it, to listen without needing to fix, to stay soft without losing power. She shows him that love isn't about merging into one, it's about dancing between two truths, honoring both. They speak less, but somehow say more. Their silence feels full, like the forest after a storm, peaceful, alive, whole. When they touch, it's not about claiming or proving. It's about presence, a reminder that connection doesn't have to be loud to be real. He begins to understand that the feminine was never something to conquer or protect. It was something to learn from. Through her, he sees how love flows when it's free, how it gives without losing, how it grows without forcing. When they part, he doesn't feel loss. He feels gratitude. She has given him something no victory ever could, the understanding that love, at its highest form, is not possession. It's respect. It's two souls standing side by side, unafraid of each other's light. As she walks away, the wind moves through the trees, carrying her scent, her warmth, her lesson. He smiles, knowing this was her gift to remind him that true strength is gentle, and true love never needs to be owned to be real. He sees his father again, not in person, but in memory. The face that once made him flinch now feels distant, almost fragile. For years that image carried weight. It was filled with anger, disappointment, and words that were never said. Every time he looked at himself, he saw pieces of that man staring back, and he hated it. He promised himself he would never become him. But the older he gets, the more he realizes that fighting the reflection only keeps it alive. It happens one evening, when the sky turns gold and quiet. He's walking through the ruins of his thoughts, when something inside him softens. He remembers the way his father's hands shook when he was tired, the way his voice cracked when he tried to sound strong, the way he hid his pain behind silence, because that's what men were taught to do. For the first time, he doesn't see a giant shadow or a rival. He sees a man flawed, scared, doing the best he could with what little he was given. He sits down and lets the memories come. The anger rises, but this time, he doesn't feed it. He lets it move through him like smoke. He remembers the lessons his father taught, without words, how to keep going, how to build, how to survive. He also remembers the lessons that came from pain, how to speak, how to feel, how to be the man his father couldn't. Both are gifts now. For years, he carried that wound like armor, telling himself it made him stronger. But now he sees it for what it really was, a chain. It kept him repeating the same silence, the same distance, the same hardness that once hurt him. To forgive his father isn't to excuse what happened. It's to stop letting it define him. It's to stop living in reaction to a ghost. He whispers into the still air, not expecting a reply. "I understand now," he says softly. "You were learning too." The words feel strange at first, but then freeing. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it transforms it. It takes pain and turns it into wisdom. It turns blame into empathy. He feels something loosen in his chest, a weight lifting that he didn't realize he was still carrying. The boy who once looked at his father with hurt now looks at him with compassion. He understands that his father's silence was not rejection, it was fear. Fear of being seen, fear of being weak, fear of repeating the pain he never learned to heal. The cycle ends here. The anger has nowhere left to go. It dissolves, replaced by something quieter: gratitude. Not for the wounds, but for the lessons they revealed. He knows now that his father gave him what he could, and life gave him the rest. As the evening light fades, he feels peace settle in. The reflection in the mirror no longer frightens him. The man he has become carries both their stories not as burdens, but as bridges. The wound is no longer a scar. It's a doorway. And on the other side of it waits understanding, patience, and a kind of love he never thought he'd feel again. It begins quietly, not with a reunion, but with recognition. He meets other men, some younger, some older, each carrying the same invisible weight. They talk about work, weather, daily life, all the usual things men use to keep silence safe. But beneath the small talk, there's something else, something unspoken yet deeply familiar. A shared ache, a quiet exhaustion from pretending to be fine. For a long time, he believed he was the only one who felt it. But now he sees it in their eyes too. that same flicker of pain hidden behind practiced calm. One night, as they sit around a fire, the air begins to shift. The usual jokes fade, the armor lowers, and one of them speaks not in confidence, but in truth. He talks about feeling lost, about not knowing who he is anymore. His voice shakes as he speaks, but no one interrupts, no one fixes. They just listen. Something sacred happens in that silence. It's as if the walls that kept them apart start to dissolve. Then another man speaks, and another. Stories begin to spill of fathers who never said, "I love you," of sons who never learned how to cry, of hearts that broke quietly behind closed doors. The fire crackles between them, warm and forgiving. There's no shame here, no judgment, no need to compete. Just men remembering how to feel again. He realizes that for years they were all taught the same lie, that strength meant silence, that emotion meant weakness, that love had to be earned. But here, under the open sky, those rules no longer apply. Vulnerability becomes the new language, and it feels like truth. They speak not to impress, but to understand. Not to lead, but to connect. He watches as their faces soften, their shoulders drop. Their laughter returns, not the forced kind, but the real kind, the kind that comes from being seen. He feels something awaken inside him, a kind of brotherhood that isn't built on status or success, but on honesty. It's not about being the strongest in the room anymore. It's about helping each other carry what's heavy. He sees now that healing isn't a solo journey. The same way the feminine taught him to feel, the brotherhood teaches him to belong. Each man becomes a mirror, not reflecting ego, but truth. They hold space for each other's pain, and in doing so, they begin to heal not just their own wounds, but something far older, the collective wound of men who were told they had to walk alone. As the night deepens, the fire burns low, and a quiet peace settles over them. They don't need to say much more. The connection itself says everything. He looks around and realizes that strength was never meant to isolate. It was meant to unite. When he finally rises to leave, he feels lighter, not because his burdens are gone, but because they're shared. The man who once thought brotherhood was about power now knows it's about presence. And for the first time in his life, he doesn't just stand as a man among men, he stands as part of something whole. There comes a point when he realizes he doesn't need to speak loudly anymore. The need to prove, to be seen, to be recognized, it all fades like smoke after a fire. He used to think power was something you showed, something you wore like armor so the world would know you were strong. But now, he understands that real power doesn't announce itself. It simply is. It moves quietly, like the tide, steady, unseen, but shaping everything it touches. He wakes each morning with a kind of calm that used to scare him. There's no rush to conquer the day, no desperate list of things to achieve. He moves with intention, not urgency. The silence that once felt heavy now feels sacred, a reminder that he no longer needs to chase what is already his. His worth doesn't depend on the noise of the world anymore. It lives quietly beneath his skin, solid and unshakable. People notice the change, though he doesn't speak of it. They sense it in his presence, a steadiness, a warmth, a kind of peace that draws others in without trying. He doesn't command attention, yet people listen when he speaks. He doesn't seek control, yet things naturally align around him. This is the paradox of quiet power. It doesn't dominate, it radiates. He remembers the version of himself who always needed to be the loudest, the most capable, the one who never broke. That man was driven by fear, fear of being forgotten, fear of being small, fear of being unseen. Now he understands that the greatest strength is found in surrender, in not needing to be more than he already is. The silence he once ran from has become his foundation. When challenges come, he doesn't fight them with force anymore. He meets them with presence. He listens before acting. He observes before judging. He responds instead of reacting. His power no longer lives in his fists or his words, it lives in his awareness, in the way he stands, the way he breathes, the way he stays still when the world spins around him. There's a purity to his energy now, a groundedness that doesn't need validation. He can walk into chaos and remain untouched, not because he's indifferent, but because he's rooted. The storms that once knocked him down now move through him, leaving only wisdom behind. Sometimes people ask him what changed, but he doesn't have an answer they would understand. It wasn't one moment, one lesson, or one revelation. It was a slow unfolding, the shedding of everything false until only truth remained. As the sun sets, he sits in silence, watching the light fade into gold. He feels no need to capture it, no urge to hold it. He just lets it be. That's what he's learned, that power isn't in control, it's in presence. And in the quiet of his own being, he realizes something simple and profound. He doesn't need to shine anymore. He is the light. The world around him begins to shift, not because he forces it to, but because he no longer needs to. The man who once ruled through control now moves through life with openness. The energy that once burned hot with ambition has cooled into something steady, something warm. The people who used to feel small in his presence now feel safe. They can breathe around him. They can be themselves. That's the quiet miracle of a healed man. His peace doesn't stay within him. It spreads. He doesn't talk about leadership anymore. He lives it. When he speaks, it's not to command, but to connect. His words carry weight not because they're clever, but because they're honest. He no longer leads through pride or image. He leads through example, by showing what it looks like to walk through the fire and come out softer, not harder. The kingdom he once tried to control now flourishes on its own, not because he holds it tightly, but because he finally learned to let it breathe. People notice the change. They see it in his eyes, calm, grounded, unguarded. He no longer hides his scars. He wears them like reminders. When someone falls, he doesn't scold them for their weakness. He kneels beside them because he remembers what it was like to be on the ground himself. His empathy no longer drains him. It guides him. He doesn't seek to fix people anymore. He simply listens. And somehow, that's enough. His presence gives others permission to feel, to be seen, to be real. It's strange how healing works. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It invites. And the more he heals himself, the more the world around him begins to heal too. The same people who once mirrored his chaos now mirror his peace. He begins to see how his outer life was always just a reflection of his inner state. The kingdom didn't crumble because the world betrayed him. It fell because he was at war with himself. Now that the war is over, the land grows fertile again. Relationships that once felt strained now flow with ease. Work feels meaningful again, not because it defines him, but because it allows him to give. He walks through the village square, the same place that once felt heavy with judgment and expectation, and for the first time, it feels alive. Laughter returns. Music drifts through the air, and faces once tense with fear now glow with trust. The people rise, not because he demands it, but because his presence reminds them that they can. He has learned that a true king doesn't stand above his people. He stands among them. His power doesn't come from being needed. It comes from being whole. He no longer rules by law, but by love, a love that doesn't bind or control, but lifts. As the sun sets over his rebuilt kingdom, he understands what the old stories meant when they spoke of renewal. The land wasn't healed by power. It was healed by heart. And the man who once ruled from ego now leads from essence, quietly, authentically, and with a grace that makes everyone around him remember their own light. There was a time when he tried to hide every trace of pain, when he covered his wounds with silence and smiled as though they had never existed. He thought strength meant erasing the past, pretending he had healed before he actually had. But the truth is, healing doesn't erase the scar, it transforms it. The mark remains, not as a reminder of weakness, but as proof that he lived through what was meant to destroy him and still chose to keep his heart open. He touches the scar sometimes, feeling the faint ridge beneath his skin. It no longer burns. It no longer aches. It glows in its own quiet way, not with light you can see, but with understanding. Every part of his journey lives inside it. The fall, the pain, the silence, the surrender, all of it is woven into that single mark. It's the story of how he broke and how he rebuilt, but differently this time. Slower, truer, softer. He no longer hides it from others. When people see it, they ask what happened, expecting a story of tragedy. But what he tells them is something else entirely. He says the wound was his greatest teacher, that it stripped him down until there was nothing left to lose except his own illusions. Through it, he learned that you don't become whole by pretending you've never been broken. You become whole by embracing the parts that once hurt and seeing the light that grew through them. In the world he now walks through, scars are rare. People still chase perfection, still fear the cracks that make them human, but he no longer envies them. He's seen where hiding leads to numbness, to loneliness, to a life that looks beautiful from the outside but feels empty inside. His scar, instead, has become his truth. It keeps him grounded. It reminds him that authenticity will always shine brighter than appearance. The people around him sense it too. They feel his calm, his honesty, the quiet strength that comes from surviving himself. They open up in his presence without knowing why. It's because they recognize something in him that they've been searching for permission to be real. The light behind his scar becomes a kind of mirror, showing others that their own wounds aren't shameful. They're sacred. He stands differently now, not taller, but steadier. The pride that once came from appearance now comes from integrity. He doesn't need to prove that he's healed. The proof is in the way he lives, in the way he listens, in the way he can hold both pain and peace without trying to hide either. As night falls, he looks at his reflection and sees the faint glimmer of the scar beneath the fading light. Once, it felt like a flaw. Now, it feels like a crown, not the kind that shines from gold or glory, but from truth. The man who once feared being broken has become the one who understands that the most beautiful light often lives behind what hurt the most. And in that glow, he finally sees himself whole, real, and free. He stands at the edge of his rebuilt world, watching the light return to the places that were once shadows. The man who once fought so hard to be seen no longer needs to. His presence alone is enough. The rise he once imagined, the one built on power, on approval, on being untouchable, was an illusion. The real rise happened here, in the quiet, after the breaking. He has become something deeper than what he ever tried to be. He is not the same man who fell. That version of him was built from fear, from pride, from the belief that strength meant never bending. Now, he understands that true strength is the opposite. It's the ability to kneel, to listen, to forgive. His power no longer comes from being above anyone. It comes from being among them. The crown he wears now isn't made of gold or glory. It's invisible, carried in how he treats people, in how he leads with calm instead of control. He walks through his kingdom, not the one built from walls and thrones, but the one built from connection. He meets the eyes of those around him and sees reflections of his own story there. They rise, not because he commands them to, but because his presence reminds them that they can. His wisdom isn't loud. It lives in small moments, in the way he listens, in the way he forgives, in the way he stays patient when others lose their way. He has learned that love is the truest form of leadership, not the kind that demands or binds, but the kind that sees and understands. The man who once ruled from ego now rules from heart. The same fire that once burned with pride now burns with purpose. He knows pain will still come, but he no longer fears it. Pain no longer threatens his identity. It deepens it. When he looks back, he doesn't see failure anymore. He sees initiation. Every fall, every mistake, every heartbreak was a chapter in the making of this moment. The fall wasn't his undoing. It was his awakening. The crown was never lost. It was simply waiting for him to become ready to wear it truthfully. He moves through life differently now. Slower, more aware, more grateful. The noise that once pulled him away from himself has quieted. In its place lives peace. Not because life is perfect, but because he no longer needs it to be. He understands that the true kingdom exists not outside of him, but within him, a place where love and wisdom sit side by side, where humility guards the gates. As dusk settles and the sky turns to gold, he closes his eyes and breathes deeply. The boy, the warrior, the king, all parts of him have come home. He has risen, not as who he once was, but as who he was always meant to become. The wounded king is no longer lost in the fire. He has become the light that shines from it, eternal, grounded, and free.